Alright, so for this video, we're going to do Ronda Rousey. We're going to see how attractive Ronda Rousey is. Her overall face rating is a 6.8. How rare is that? That's 1 in 50 people. Her percentage of people is a top 2%. Her side facial score is an 89%. Her front facial score is a 55%. Her total facial harmony score is a 68%. Her facial dimorphism is a 5.5. Her body fat factors is a 7. Her miscellaneous features is an 8.5. I got the tier list to the side. Tier 1, ideal. Tier 2, near ideal. Tier 3, normal. Tier 4, slight flaw. Tier 5, flaw. Tier 6, huge flaw. And Tier 7, breaks harmony. Now, this is the overall facial assessment breakdown. So these are the things that I feel like are the biggest flaws in her facial profile view, in the front and also from the side as well. So Ronda Rousey will be classified as having a horse face. The mid-face ratio is low, and on top of that, her field trim is long. And with this can introduce another flaw, which is that her facial width to height ratio is also low as well. So I'll be explaining what these things are once we get to it. In her side facial profile, the nasal bridge is low and not protrusive enough for her face. That's why her nasal protrusion and the facial convexity from the nasion is not within the ideal range. So her side facial score is almost flawless because it's 89%, like I said before. But these are just the small little things that I noticed in the side view profile. She does have more flaws in the front view profile, which I will break down right now. So these are the rarity scores of other celebrities so you can have an idea. Now her eye separation ratio is the first measurement that we're going to go to. Now the eye separation ratio is probably the biggest measurement out of everything, and hers is a huge flaw at tier 6 at 41.5%, and that means that her pupils are too close together relative to her face width, and this is a big flaw. Her facial thirds is quite even, so it shouldn't deviate more than 3% away from 33, and everything else is evened out. And her middle third is the largest at 35%, and this is feminizing, so that is ideal as well, and feminizing. So you want both of them to be within that range for a female. So her canthal tilt, so how tilted is her eyes, is at 5 degrees. So that is good, but is near ideal. The reason why she doesn't get full points at a tier 1 is because you want it to be at least 6 degrees, so she wasn't too far off. Her facial width to height ratio, so how compact is the mid-face, and her mid-face is not really compact at all at 1.83, so this makes the face look more elongated. Like I said before, this is still within the normal range, but this is not ideal at all. Her jaw frontal angle is too wide. She does have a very wide jaw. That is a tier 3, which is still within the normal range, but that is not ideal. You want a jaw to be at least, bare minimum, at least no more than like around 97 degrees, and hers is 5 degrees more than that. Her cheekbone high settiness, so how high set is her cheekbones? And her cheekbones is at 100, so it's at the eye line, so that's why I consider it to be 100. Her bigonial width, so how wide is her jaw relative to her cheekbones, and it is at 84 degrees, or 84%, I mean, and this is ideal at the lower end, so she does not have that much of a wide jaw relative to her cheekbones, but still within the ideal range. Her total facial height to width ratio, so how long is her face compared to how wide is her face, and it's at 1.34, so this is close, very, very close to the ideal range. For a woman, women do have shorter faces or shorter heads in general, so this is technically not a flaw. This is close to the ideal range, so that's not too bad. Her chin to field trim ratio is a tier 1 at 2, so ideally for women you want 2 or 2.5, and hers is at the lower end, but she does, like I said, have a long field trim, so that kind of helps supplement. Her neck width is at 95%, so for a man this would be ideal, but for a female it is not ideal at all. You do want a small. Her mouth to nose width ratio, tier 1, this is ideal at 1.46, so the width of her nose should ideally be within the inner crease of the eyes, and the width of the mouth should be near the iris of the eye. So in this view, it's kind of hard to tell because she's kind of looking to the left side, but I can just tell from here that this is within the ideal range, and she does have a pretty good sized nose relative to her mouth and relative to her eyes as well. So these are all harmonious features. Her mid-face ratio is a 0.95, and this is not too far from the ideal range at 0.95, which is 95, but it's supposed to be at least to 1, and this is only 0.5 away from 1, or 0.5 away from 1. This is not too bad of a flaw, but it's still within the normal range. But this means that her mid face is a little bit too long, so this is not going to be ideal, but within the normal range. Her eyebrow settiness, so how high set is her eyes, and it is at 1.64, and 1.64 is going to be a slight flaw. Her eyebrows is a little bit too far away from her eyes, and you don't want your eyes to be too far away. You want it to be as close as possible, more like mid to close set eyebrows relative to your eye line, and that it would have been ideal for her, especially for a female. Her eye spacing, so one eye test, so it's supposed to be one eye width apart, and hers is at 95%, which is close to 1, so that is ideal. Her eye aspect ratio, you want almond eyes preferably. For women, it should supposed to be, I think, around 2.8 to 3.2, and she is within that range, so that will be perfect. Her lower lip to upper lip ratio is also perfect as well. Your upper lip ideally needs to be lower than your bottom lip, so your bottom lip is supposed to be bigger than your upper lip lengthwise, so it's supposed to be within the 1.4 to 2 range, and 1.8 is in between that range, so that is perfect. Her deviation from her ipsilateral iliac angle to her jaw frontal angle, so how wide set is her eyes relative to how wide is her jaw, and those are supposed to be harmonious and be synced in relatively or parallel to each other, and hers deviate by 9 degrees, and that is going to be near to ideal, so that's not too bad. Her eyebrow tilt, so how tilted is her eyebrows, and is at 9.5 degrees, so that is a slightly away from the ideal range, but that's still not bad because it's tilted nevertheless. Her bitemporal width, so how wide is her forehead relative to her cheekbones, and is at 84%, so that is at the bottom of the ideal range, but that's still within the ideal, so that's good. So her lower third proportion, so if you divide your lower third, your upper third is supposed to be at least 1/3 of the whole length of your lower third, and hers is at 35%, so that is very close to 33%. It shouldn't deviate no more than 3% from 33%, so that is perfect. Her ipsilateral iliac angle, like I said again, to measure how wide set your eyes is relative to the nasion, right? And going all the way outside to the outer edges of your eyes, and hers is at 93 degrees, and that is perfect. So her eyes not too wide set, is within the ideal range. Her gonial angle is at 126 degrees, so that is within the ideal range for females. For males, it's a little bit more tighter, so 123 would be the highest end for males, and 128 would be the highest end for females, so it's a bit different. And they can get away with having more of an obtuse gonial angle as well. Her nasal frontal angle is at 119 degrees, so this measures to see how protrusive is her brow region relative to her nasal bridge, and 119 is at the lowest end, so she does have a protrusive brow region for a female, and this is still within the ideal range, but it's at the lower end of it because she does have a protrusive brow. So she does have a lot of masculine and feminine qualities about her face, and it's just mashing up together. Preferably, you just want to have a whole bunch of feminine qualities. That's how you can get the highest score possible. Mandibular plane angle is a tier 1 at 20 degrees, and this measures how downswung is your jaw or your mandible, and her jaw is still within. Ramus to mandible ratio is a tier 1, so that's within the ideal range at 63%. So 63% of the ramus length is to the mandible length, so she does have a fairly long ramus for her mandible, and that's still within the ideal range. For females and males, it's at the same. So 59% all the way to 77% for the highest end, and she's in between that ratio. So that is perfect. Her facial convexity from the glabella is a tier 1 at 173 degrees, and 173 degrees is still perfect within the ideal range. And for men and for women, it's the same at 168 all the way to 176, and she falls in between that range, so that is perfect. Her submental cervical angle is at 89 degrees, and 89 degrees is ever so slightly outside of the range. If she would have been around 90 degrees, that would have been ideal, but she's ever so slightly outside of it. But still, this is not a flaw by any means. Her nasal-facial angle, so that's the inner angle created from the nasion all the way to the chin, and hers is at 34 degrees, and she does have a perfect relationship between her nasion and also her chin. Her nasal labial angle is at 100 degrees, and this determines how upturned or downturned the nose is, and she has a fairly upturned nose, so this is perfect. Her orbital vector, so that's the orbital rim that's around the eyes, and you want your orbital rims to be protrusive. If you don't have orbital rims that's protrusive, you will have eye bags, or usually eye bags or dark circles around the eyes, and she doesn't have that at all. She does have a protrusive orbital rim, and she does have a lot of bone support underneath the eyes, and this is positive, so this will be a tier 1. Her total facial convexity measures how convex the face is relative to the nose as well. So the only difference between the facial convexity from the glabella and this facial convexity is that it adds the nose as well, or the nasal protrusion as well. And hers is at 150, so this is really, really high, and this is still within the normal range. But if her nose was a little bit more protrusive, it would have been ideal. Now, she doesn't lack nasal protrusion for her face, but like I said again, she does have a very high brow ridge. Now, if she, like I said before, if she had a more protrusive, just a little bit more protrusive nasal bridge, she could get away with having more of a protrusive nose as well. So if her nasal bridge was more protrusive, it's kind of hard to explain, but it goes relative to everything else, typically. So her mental labial angle is 122 degrees, and 122 degrees is still within the ideal range, and that's the relationship between the bottom lip and the chin, and that's the indent that's formed, or the fold that's formed right here. Next measurement, her facial convexity from the nasion is slightly off at 162. If she, like I said again, if she had a more protrusive nasal bridge, that would have been within the ideal, but that's just a slight flaw. It's nothing too big. Her nasal projection is 0.69, so 69% of the nose width relative to the width of the nasal bridge, like I said again, and this is still within the normal range, but it's not ideal. She does have a very projected nose for her nasal bridge. But if, like I said before, if her nasal bridge was just a little bit longer, like right here, coming from right here all the way right there, if her nasal bridge was right over here, then her nose would have been perfect. So it's only the lack of nasal bridge, not the nose protrusion, but just the nasal bridge. Her nasal width to height projection, so the length of the nose relative to her face, and is at 0.96, so 96% of the width relative to how long the nose is, and that is still within the normal range, but it's not ideal. Her Ricketts E-line is a tier 1. She does have a good relationship between her nose, lips, and chin, and these are just lip measurements. So the E-line goes from the nasal tip all the way down to the chin, and the upper lip is supposed to be behind the line by 4 millimeters, and the bottom lip is supposed to be behind the line by 2 millimeters, which it is, so that's why it's a tier 1. The H-line goes from the tip of the upper lip down to the chin, and the bottom lip is supposed to touch the line, which it does, so that's a tier 1. The S-line goes from the middle of the nose down to the chin, and the upper and bottom lip are supposed to touch the line, which it does again. The burstal line goes from the nasion, the subnasion, down to the chin, and the upper lip is supposed to be a little bit ahead of the line than the bottom lip. And as you can see, that's the case. So she does get a tier 1 for that. Her nasal mental angle is a relationship between the nasal protrusion and the chin, and it also takes into the facial convexity as well. And hers is a tier 1, and that is ideal at the very lowest end at 125 degrees. Her gonian to mouth relationship, you want your gonian to be below your mouth line, and her gonian is below her mouth line, and it just the adequate size for the jaw, and it just a little jaw measurement that's there. Her recession relative to the Frankfurt plane angle, so you do not want to have any jaw recession. You preferably want your chin to be past your nasion and preferably your glabella. And as you can see, it's past her nasion, which her nasion is right here, and it's also past her glabella, which is right here too. And I already said about her protrusive brow, her protrusive brow ridge, and the fact that her chin is past her protrusive brow ridge tells me a lot. So she is not lacking when it comes to chin protrusion, so that's good. Her brow ridge inclination is at 17 degrees, and that is also a tier 1, and that is ideal. That's still within the higher end of the brow ridge inclination for females, so she does have a fairly masculinized face. Her nasal tip is going to be the last measurement for today, and it is at 123 degrees, and that is a tier 1. Now, females typically have higher nasal tips than men because they do have more upturned nose, so therefore the angle is going to be much more bigger or much more obtuse, so therefore they can kind of get away with that a little bit more for the nasal tip. Now, if you want me to rate your face or anything like that, make sure to hit me up on my email. I will put my email down in the description, and I'll also put my Instagram down in the description. You can also hit me up on Instagram too, IG, and from there I'll tell you what to do. I'll just give you the instructions, and within 24 hours or maybe 48 hours, depending on how busy I am that day, you'll receive your rating, and yeah, with all the information that you need. And I'll all do this for free, no charge needed. So yeah, that's it, and I'm out.